In this video, I'm going to walk you through a demo cap table that I put together based on my experience working with many venture-backed companies. Like all my workbooks, I start off with a control tab here, right? In this tab, I lay out all the different types of share classes that we might see, and different key elements about it, different things to look for, change of control, how we want to look at outputs, vested only, totals with change of controls, different shareholder groupings, etc., etc. The idea here is to make it dynamic so that way we can always add to it. As anyone who's ever gotten into these things has learned, there's always something new that's added that's a little different, right? You start off with 3 classes, you add a 4th, then a 5th, and then, we issue this share and it doesn't have change of control, but all the others do, or this is a participating preferred and this is a non-participating preferred, et cetera, et cetera. This model is designed to support all those nuances. For those of you who are still trying to learn a bit about the cap tables and what an investor might be trying to negotiate with you, I'm also happy to engage with you in that regard and show you and teach you about the different things and what they mean. Some of the most important negotiations you can do as an entrepreneur are with your investors as it relates to the cap table. So here, first tab, it's the names of all the various listings of people that have shares. You can see I'm from Baltimore and a Michigan fan. I went to Michigan, and you can tell that by some of the names. And I categorize them, as you'll see later as this will flow through, so that way people are in the right categories. I've built this in a super automated way. Part of my logic of building it in such an automated way is it allows me to build it and then hand it off to you, right? A lot of the hard work is done in the beginning, and then, oftentimes this can be outsourced to a more junior analyst or a controller or someone else to say, hey, we issued a few more grants, or we did another round, just add another line, right? I've built it in that way so you don't have to call me every single time after this has been built for you. So here we've got a series of the different inputs, right? So first I showed you the different names and where a person gets categorized up. Here we have the different types of securities. So in this tab we're looking at a preferred security, right? Preferred securities are usually limited to those who have contributed capital, actual hard cash into a business. It's where your investors usually go. There's usually different subclasses within that preferred class based on when they invested, right? You start with a seed round, and then you have an A round, and then maybe an A1 and a B, and et cetera, et cetera. And again, with each one of those rounds, you're going to have things like a liquidation preference. You may or may not have what's called PIK, which is called payment, which stands for payment in kind interest, right? So basically, you're not paying your investors a dividend as a venture-backed company that's generally cash flow negative, but what you're doing is you're saying, we'll pay you 10% interest that will accumulate, and then when we have an exit, that comes out to you first. Common shares, these are usually given to individuals in exchange for maybe buying their business, right? If you're a startup that has bought other businesses and you paid in stock, this is how you might do it. Also, those who had options and those options became exercisable, they exercise into common shares. Common shares won't have a strike price. Here I show a price per share more informationally, just to say that's what this person paid for it. But that money has already been paid to the company and doesn't really typically would have an impact in a waterfall scenario. In the preferreds before, what someone paid absolutely would matter if you have a liquidation preference or a PIK or something of that nature. Then moving along, right? Restricted commons. So restricted commons are in between options and common. They are typically used in situations where you want to grant someone options, but you also want them to get the tax benefits of holding an actual security. And there's a whole lot of nuances there that I can certainly get in with you offline on how that works and what you're looking for. But generally with restricted stock, you are going to have a price paid, but rather than actually paying it, companies will oftentimes issue loans to the recipients of them, so they're not out cash. And then again, you have things like, will they have forward vesting upon change of control, and what's the interest rate of that loan if you do a loan, and what's the different vesting cycles. Here we've got something where it's a 1-year cliff on some of these, right? And then quarterly thereafter, right? In this example. Anyway, rolling through. Next is options. Options, like I said again, it's not an actual security in the company. It is the right to purchase a security in the company, and oftentimes you actually don't have that right yet because there's a vesting component to it. You have to wait a year or 2 years or 3 years or maybe a quarter after. Someone issues you a grant for 1,000 options that 250 of them become exercisable after a year, and then every quarter thereafter you get another chunk. This tab here allows us to set up the waterfall, right? So right now it's set to a January 2024 exit at $500 million. This tab here is used to increase an ESOP pool. So basically, as you issue more shares to investors, you need to make sure you have enough shares to also issue to employees, because that's a large part of the incentive of working at a startup company. And then here, warrants. Warrants are very, very similar to options. The only difference is that they're often granted to people that are not actual employees of the company, but rather third parties, contractors, vendors, things of that nature. And then here I've got some outputs. So here we've got the cap table output, right, which effectively takes all the information from those other tabs, rolls it up together, and shows you exactly how many shares are outstanding. This was the categorization that I was showing you before between an investor. I think we had the classifications for investor, founder, and employee. Do whatever you want. If you want to do these types of subtotals, they are fairly common to show it in methods like this. One of the things that's kind of cool, if you're looking at what I'm doing here in this formula, you can see like, hey, it's blank, but there's still a formula up in the formula bar. I've designed this in such a way where all you have to do is drag down and it continues to work when you add new people. Again, in the spirit of building something that is highly scalable, right? And you don't need me every single time. If this was a hard-coded, Cal Ripken's name right here, then this really wouldn't work all that well if I needed to add another person in. But because this is all built out in this way, it's just the drag down continues to work. And then the waterfall. So what a waterfall is, right, is it says, okay, we're going to sell this company for $500 million. What does that mean if I have 1,961 shares, right? And so this goes through the logic and actually breaks it down. And the reason why they call it a waterfall is because you go from step to step to step. So in this example, we're starting off with $500 million, right? Those restricted shares, there were loans outstanding, so there's another 77 grand that comes from that, and that's all calculated through. And then there's logic with the options and the warrants here that go through and say, well, what is my strike price on that option? Is that more than the share would be worth if I exercise it? If so, I should exercise it. If not, don't. Right? So it's not just a simple, oh, you had a strike price of $5. Let's put that in. If it turns out that at the exit value, each share is only going to be worth $3, well, then you're not going to do it. And then obviously that gets kind of circular because that $3 is based on how many people convert, and all of that fun logic is built into a model like this. That's what makes these models complicated for many people, and that's why you need an expert that really has a lot of experience in this work to do this for you, because it's very easy to mess up. And if you mess it up, you're going to end up with a dramatically incorrect result, or could end up with a dramatically incorrect result, which would be misleading to investors, employees, and everyone else, right? So we want to be really, really tight about this and make sure it's right. It even could have implications from a tax perspective when figuring out, what was the cost of the item of the security you gave to an employee, and therefore, what do they need to be charged on their W-2 and things of that nature. So lots of ramifications there, and super important to get it right. And then so basically, I walk through all that math. I do that logic of the if it's worth it, do it. If not, don't do it. I do that actually using some macros that then run in a formula on all the various pages. I'll show you one over here just as an example. You can see, where is it? We got some standard logic, and then this one, this test vesting is the function that I built that basically looks at the date of vesting. It looks at the strike price. It looks at the options issued, etc., to figure out if it makes sense to exercise or not, right? And depending on that value, the company would, wouldn't. And then what you're left with down here, sorry, bouncing around a little bit, is an output that then says, okay, for every single person, this is what they make. And so in Cal Ripken's case, right, for that, however many shares he had, what did we say? 1,961. That's worth about $206,000 to him in this scenario. And then if I say, well, what if we only sold the company for, I don't know, let's say $5 million, right? And this is a manual calc, but I'm going to press F9 now and hit refresh. It's only worth $287 to him, not worth a whole lot of money. In some cases, you're going to actually see these negatives. The negatives would take place because of restricted stock, right? So if it was an option, you would just say, like Jim Harbaugh here is at $0. That's because he had an option and he's never going to be in the negative. But with the restricted stock, the ones where people actually had taken a loan out, in that case, it's kind of forced, and so you have no choice, and you actually would end up, technically speaking, in a negative scenario. Oftentimes, what really happens in those cases is the company would forgive the loan, but then that person would have a tax consequence as well. So anyway, quick run through on this. Hope you enjoyed the video, and if you need help with cap tables, I'd be happy to help you.